both my grandparents sacrificed everything for Sid. He was the golden boy, the oil anointed, because my grandfather worked down the mine all his life from the age of 14. My grandmother, was in the kitchen, running the house. Neither of them read books. They were just working class people who worked hard, had very little to spare. Along came Sid, and the stories he would tell, which you always have to take with a pinch of salt. There's always a kernel of truth there, but sometimes it's gilded. But he would say that he was imitating the sound of a ticking clock when he was 4 months old, that he could speak when he was 8 and 9 months old, that he was doing Winston Churchill impressions when he was 2 years old, all this kind of stuff. So for them, I think it felt like they'd been beamed down from Planet Zog. Who was this child? And he read books voraciously, he had a brilliant mind, very, very intelligent, but very different, to them. It was clear he wasn't going to go down the pit, which was of great, consolation to my grandfather. The last thing he wanted them to do. So in order for him to fulfil that obvious academic talent he had and ability at school, that all the money went on buying him desks, the best desks he could get, buying him books. That they actually moved from a bigger house in the pit village where my dad grew up to a smaller colliery cottage with an outdoor toilet and one less bedroom, because it would be cheaper, so more money could go on Sid. So the sacrifice was enormous. As he always said, there wasn't a great deal of money around, but there was a lot of love and a lot of sacrifice.
One of his characteristics that hit home with me was his photographic memory.
I grew up surrounded by books. Sid read voraciously, 2 or 3 books a week sometimes, of all kinds, of all genres. And I read, I write books and I read books a lot, and we would discuss books that we both read. And I think I had a decent memory, but he remembered, for example, Henderson the Rain King by Saul Bellow, which is his favourite book. I remember I read that many years, he kept going on about it, was his favourite book, and I read it, and we were discussing it, say, maybe 3 or 4 weeks later after I'd finished reading it the next time we saw each other. And he remembered more of it, the book, from 20 odd years ago when he'd read it, I'd just finished reading it, and he was going, on page 73, things like that. He'd be like, yeah, okay, Dad. But he had that phenomenal memory, everything was in there. And then when it came to commentary, he had an encyclopedia in his brain that he could use for all the references and allusions that he became famous for.
When he spoke, I listened. I was mesmerised in his presence. But judging from your book, I wasn't alone, was I?
No, he was a charismatic man, my dad, but he was a very social creature. He knew how to communicate with people. He was very inclusive. He would never you would never feel like you were being preached to or lectured to. At the darts, it became a bit sad towards the end when he would get mobbed. People, but you get 10,000 people, well refreshed in an arena.
Never.
Sid Waddell walks out. It's like, Sid! They all jump over and mobbed him. Because in the early days of darts, he would, it's a cliche, but he would have time for everybody. You couldn't quite believe that people wanted his autograph in the first place. He was happy to sign for it, but do a story, he would stop for a photo. People really enjoyed spending time with him, and he would have time for them. And that was all through his life. In every job he did, every single place he went, he's always remembered very fondly. There are very few people who had a bad word to say for him. But he was warm, he was inclusive, and he made everything a bit of a laugh. He always loved it when a story emerged from a night out, a night to dismember, he used to refer to them, having a boozy night out. There'd always be a story, it would always be memorable, and people always enjoyed that. And he was one of those guys, as I discovered when I was writing the book, once met, never forgotten. He was an ideas man. He just came up with ideas. So when they were doing in those days, as you well know, regional news was done in very super fashion, much like the sort of BBC news. And my dad always rebelled against that. He always thought, we're doing this is the news for the Geordie people in the Tyne-Tees region. It needs to reflect some of the fun and the vigour of the community it represents. So he was forever coming up with ideas for news packages, quirky ones. But he came up with this idea of setting the Miners' Gala in Durham, which was always covered very reverently, and setting it to music so it would be less boring. And it nearly got him fired because Harold Wilson, the Prime Minister, had attended, and they'd set him, woke him, and various other Labour Party high-ranking politicians to Dancing in the Street by Martha and Ellis. And that's not how you were meant to treat the Prime Minister, a big do like this. So he was, he was nearly fired for that.
I'd forgotten that he was responsible for, or a programme of my generation would remember. Again, another string to his bow, the Flaxton Boys.
Yeah, and that's a great story.
What was that all about?
Did you ever meet Donald Baverstock?
Yes.
Yeah, Baverstock was just, they don't make him like him anymore.
No.
He recognised ideas men, and he liked creative people, and he liked to throw them all together. What did my dad describe him as? The epitome of the creative volcano,
right.
Is what Sid described him. He was in the pub behind Yorkshire TV Friday afternoon. Sid was in there, half of Yorkshire Television were in there, and he said, I've got a network to historical drama for children. And Sid said, "Oh, we're doing it. Are we doing one?" He went, "Yeah, can you write the first episode for me by Monday? This is Friday afternoon." And Sid was like, "What?" But then he mentioned it might be a bit of extra money for him, and it was more than Sid did a couple of months, so it was okay. So he spent the whole weekend, and he came up with the Flaxton Boys. And he wrote that first episode over the weekend, handed it to Baverstock on Monday, who loved it and said, "Can I have the second episode by Friday?" But that's how Flaxton Boys came into being. I mean, that's how things happened in those days.
You say the programme or the film, the best produced film Sid made was the behind the scenes with Don Revie. How did Sid persuade Don Revie to allow him access all areas for that film, apart from, I would imagine, the obvious?
Yeah, I mean, I think some money was offered, and Don liked a few quid. I think, again, my dad's charm. He just did have the ability to charm the leaves off a tree, and he went out there and he got involved. I mean, he became quite good friends with like Terry Yorath and Billy Bremner and people involved with Leeds over a period of time. And I think he just managed to persuade Revie to do this. I mean, because I remember watching it quite recently. Mm. It's on the British Film Institute's website, so you can watch it, or it was. And I watched it, because Revie was well known for being a very guarded, very private man. And all of a sudden, here he's been filmed, sat up in bed, floral pink bedspread, his wife bringing in his breakfast on a tray. The night after they'd lost to Liverpool at Anfield 1-0, I had a bad night's sleep, and he's talking about, he kept thinking about the game, and he, just unbelievably candid, sort of intimate.
But then, because you have to remember what era this was.
Yeah, you didn't go into people's bedrooms and film them, or get them with their guard down. Him playing golf, and it's a remarkable film. I watched it. I mean, I knew about it. I've got a vague recollection of watching it when I was young, maybe on an old VHS tape or something. But I never really discussed it with my dad, and I would have loved to. I was watching after he died, so I would love to have said, "How did you do that? How did you get Revie to completely let his guard down?" I mean, at one point you're watching the players walk out at Anfield, Liverpool team, and then the Leeds players come out, and there's Sid in a leather jacket, coming out with the players. He really has been. He's just he pops up about 2 or 3 times, so he can play Spot Sid.
Tell those younger people watching this what Indoor League was all about.
And they came up with this idea of a programme televising pub games. It hasn't particularly aged well. The darts is by far, you can see why that became the more popular game, and why that then sort of took off, independently, or as a result of the Indoor League, because they televised table football.
Yes.
Which, does not lend itself to... You can't see the ball moves to. You can't see the ball. You only see the ball when it flies off the table. They've got to pick it up off the floor. One of the reasons it did well, rather than just showing the pub games, he managed to sort of find these barely believable characters from the pubs of West Yorkshire and beyond. Dressed as Lee Van Cleef, as cowboys, and there was an arm wrestler who was almost like a male model, a very tall, good-looking guy who he described as the Narcissus of the knotted knuckles. And then Fred Truman mangled it and called him the Nancy boy with the knotted knuckles.
Fred Truman was the presenter. How silly.
I mean, which he hated the scripts, that my dad used to write. I don't talk like this. He would be there with his sloshing pine. And it has to be said, Fred was not a TV natural. He was a bit wooden.
Yeah.
But so he would have to, a couple of pints of continuity, as Sid called it, because he'd always have a pint of beer in his hand and they'd always have to keep it at the same level so it didn't look like it. He would say Fred was always at his best after 3 pints of continuity. And he would loosen up. But that, I mean, he's there in the huge collars and, you know, I'll see the, now then. And all these lines that my dad then put in the script. It gave it a very vivid. It was real working class television. Right to the point where they had a massive brawl in the Leeds Irish Centre, where it was like something from the Wild West, because somebody went to celebrate a goal in the table football and sort of like punch in the air like Dennis Law, punch the opposition. You know, tables turned over, fights start, people moving around, you know, completely. You know, and they trashed the place, and they had to film the next night in Hare Hill's Working Men's Club because the Leeds Irish Centre was still being put back together. So everything my dad did, he had great respect for working class culture, the people, the creatures of the tap room, and the swaggering legends of the bar. He just loved the stories with them, and he did it very sincerely. But always slight tongue in cheek with those little lines, you know, about Narcissus of the Knotted Knuckles and the Spassky of the sliding small change. He described a Chauvet player. You know, things like that was just added to it. But he did it sincerely. I think if he did it ironically, it wouldn't work.
But shove opening was great. I mean, I used to play that on the train coming back from football matches.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm brutally honest, I think of all the sports that were featured in the Undor League, shove opening was Sid's favourite, because he always said he was a shove opening champion of Yorkshire, and as it turned out, he beat Fred Truman. It was a bit like the boat race. There was no qualification. He played Fred in a final in a pub, you know, for the benefit of the Yorkshire Post, and they wrote a story, and he was crowned Chauvet champion of Yorkshire. So,
but this is a programme that had at one point 7 million viewers.
It sort of imprinted itself. It's 7 million viewers, you know, being shown at lunchtime.
So there was a presenter holding a pint of beer
at 12:30.
I'd always thought that darts was born on TV. Darts on TV was born on Indoor League, but
no, that's not the case.
No.
It's Dave Lanning, you know, the late Dave Lanning.
Yes.
Would reminded me and Sid and everybody else go to ITV were the first. I mean, Indoor League was on ITV, but the News of the World was the first real televising of a darts tournament.
Right.
You know, so and that's it stemmed from there. And Indoor League stemmed from that. Indoor League then helped make darts even more popular to the point in 1978 you had a World Championship. No doubt it was the World Championships when the BBC decided to hold a World Championship in 1978. Dave Lanning would disagree. Dave always claimed, with justification, that the ITV showed more tournaments and they didn't want to do a World Championship because they had enough tournaments. They had the World Masters, they had other tournaments. They didn't see the need of it. But the BBC wanted a piece of the action. They sort of, after snooker, had sort of the boom had exploded. They'd done a World Championship for snooker. They wanted to do the same for darts and see how that worked. On the TV, and this was the problem that ITV were having with darts, is that they were cutting between the player throwing the dart and then cutting to the board.
Right.
And it makes you feel a bit seasick watching it, because it's so. And this is on 11 o'clock at night when people are sat there with their late night cup of cocoa, about to go to bed, and there's this sort of lurching between.
Right.
And it wasn't working, and they're missing the shot half the time.
Right.
And that, but somebody, and it's disputed who, everybody claims to have come up with the idea.
Well, they would, wouldn't they?
Yeah, it's TV, isn't it? As you know, I came up with that idea. Actually, it was me. I think you'll find that was me. No, I think you'll find that was me.
And the idea was?
To split the screen. Have the darts play on one side of the screen, releasing the dartboard on the other side, landing in.
Logical. Simple.
And it works beautifully. And what it meant is that now, I can't think of another sport that's so more suited to TV. The best way to watch darts is to sit and watch it on television.
Right.
If you're actually interested in the darts itself, you've got the best view in the house. It went from being a sport that seemed impossible to show on TV to being one that's just utterly suited to the medium. And I think that's one of the reasons it boomed. As a result of that, when they got it right, particularly the following World Championship, sales of dartboards went through the roof. All of a sudden darts was...
Yeah.
And
the audiences, at its peak, were massive.
Yeah, it used to get 8 or 9 million live on a Saturday tea time when Keith Deller beat Bristow in the 1983 final. There was 8.5, 9 million people watching that live on BBC at 4:30, 4:45 in the afternoon. Incredible figures. And it was just, it boomed. He'd always say, you know, I'm not Jesus, I'm Moses. That's how he saw himself with darts. He was I lead them to the promised land. Of course, you know, Sid was a bigot, and so but he was quite a humble man, but he did sometimes play up to being a bit of a bigot. What Sid's job was, it was like the cheerleader. He was the front man. Yeah, he was the guy who, whenever they came to do publicity for darts, people came to interview people. Sid was there, gave them great quotes. Journalists went away delighted. They had great copy. You know, he fronted some of the promos for Sky just as Robin Hood and things like that. He was more than happy to do that and act daft and, you know, make it memorable. But more importantly, with the commentaries, he just added a level of varnish, of glitter to the whole thing. He gave it something different, you know, because no other sport had a commentator like Sid, you know, coming out with all these illusions, and he made these players. He loved those players, and still, you know, all the way through his career, he loved the company of the darts players. He made them seem larger than life. He had some really distinct characters in the early days of darts. Bristow, Jockey Wilson, who he loved, Bobby George, Bob Anderson, the Limestone Cowboy. Who, you know, Sid gave him that nickname.
But in the book, we had some laughs. You say that when the call from Sky came for him to commentate, he was excited.
Yeah.
But you dread it.
Yeah,
Why?
I mean, it's just purely selfish thing. We used to go down every year to the Lakeside for the World Championship. It was purely selfish reasons. You know, it was our jolly boys out with me, my mates, my stepbrother Nick, his mates, my uncle Derek, my dad's brother. We'd all pile down there, you know, and Sid loved having us there, and I can't imagine.
And that's rare.
Yeah,
by the way, you say that in the book, and I don't know of another TV presenter who wanted his family around when he was working.
Yeah, exactly. No, he was very rare. We were Sid's crowd. You were his crew. And he loved it, we loved it. So all of a sudden, and I was like, are we not going to Lakeside again? And he was like, well, I don't think so, kiddo. And I'm like, how dare you, Dad? It's like, yeah, but I'm going to Blackpool next month. And of course, then all of a sudden we started going to Blackpool. We went to Purfleet, we got all these other places, and it was, you know, the party just switched to a different venue. Well, favourite commentary of his, you know, I write about it in the book, is the 83 Della final, Della Brista final. He just lets the darts talk, and his timing of his lines and interjections are, it just, everything works. It's, you know, I remember I've watched it several times on YouTube, and you just think he just nailed it completely, you know, from the start, particularly that final set where Della you think Della's gone, and Bristow, you know, the swaggering bully of the hockey, is going to beat him, and then Della, who my dad says, he's not the underdog, he's the under puppy. You know, comes back to beat him. As for favourite lines,
oh god, there are so many.
Yeah, there are. I mean, I always like Steve Beaton. The line about Steve Beaton. You know, he turned up at the darts. Steve Beaton, young, good-looking, but with a footballer's perm, sort of wet perm. Tash. He looked a bit like a porn star, has to be said.
Right.
But he was very, you know, with darts, as you know, sort of all these sort of grey-faced men who smoked and drank a lot and weren't adverts of health or for good health. Steve Beaton looked healthy, and they made a lot about how good-looking he was, and his nickname was Adonis. I don't know who gave him it. It may well have been Sid, but then Sid in his line said, he's not Adonis, he's the Donis, when he won a match, which I always think, great line, just spot on.
You found this document.
Yeah.
Which seemingly contains his rules, perhaps the Sid Waddell rules of commentary. I mean, I can't make head nor tail of it. I'll tell you which one I love. It says, think vain.
Oh no, but he was very vain. Yeah, anybody
really?
Know? Yeah, anybody.
I never saw Sid as
yeah,
vain.
It's the one thing that he managed to sort of. But all members of the family know Sid.
Okay.
You know,
I never saw him.
There were three, as I said, there were three things that Sid couldn't pass: a pub,
yes,
shop selling Cornish pasties,
yes,
or a mirror.
Right.
No, honestly, because he would. It was hilarious. He would see a mirror and he would constantly do. You know, he had sort of wild brown curly hair, you know, sticking out at.
He was a handsome young man. Those younger photos.
Good-looking fella. Looked like James Dean, as he always told you. You know, very successful with the ladies. Lots of stories about that. You know, he was a good-looking fella, and you know, but his hair got sort of what, you know, he stopped styling it in the sort of Teddy Boy style. Yes. It was wild and curly like my grandmother's. And whenever he walked past a mirror, he would sort of give it a quick.
Right.
Never look any different. I mean, he was not a man for domestic chores.
No.
Very, you know, didn't drive, couldn't cook to save his life, couldn't, you know. I think. you could wash up. That was about it.
You say an analog man in a digital world.
Certainly, absolutely. You got a mobile phone under extreme pressure and a great, under sufferance. Did not believe in technology. Mobile phones. How are you meant to disappear for 6 or 7 hours on a good old boozy dressing room when somebody could call you or even track where you are? Jeez, it's not Sid's style at all. But yeah, he used to go shopping every Saturday, do the big shop with Irene at local supermarket. Right. And they'd walk around, and he'd only been in Pudsey for a few years. Irene had lived in Pudsey all her life. And Sid's, everybody's walking past, all the blokes. All right, Sid. He's like, all right, Trevor. And Irene would be like, who's that? And he'd go, Trevor, Butcher's Arms. And somebody else would go, all right, Sid. And he'd go, all right, John. And she'd say, who's that? He'd say, John, Golden Lion. And then this carried on. And then eventually this guy walked past, all right, Sid. All right, Malcolm. Who's that? Malcolm, any pub you care to mention. Because that's what Sid used to do. He'd divide his time amongst the pubs of Pudsey.
It was bowel cancer that took Sid from us, and I'm sure you would, say that any man out there who thinks there might be something wrong should find out sooner rather than later, because I suspect, perhaps, I don't know, you'll know better, I suspect Sid, like many men of that age, might have had an idea that something was wrong.
Yeah, I think there was. I think there was. In hindsight, there were probably a few warning signs that maybe we should have taken heed of. And the fact was, when he was diagnosed, it was too late. Really, it was inoperable. There wasn't going to be any. There was going to be treatment to sort of contain and prolong his life, rather than any talk of a cure. In sort of early August 2012, and I went up there on the train, and he was in bed, and you could tell he was really ill. He lost so much weight, and so we were taking it in turns. I was sitting by him because he was sort of drifting in and out of consciousness. And I remember one evening, I remember it vividly. It was a Saturday evening, start of the Olympics, because it was on in the next room.
The London Olympics.
The London Olympics. Yeah, everybody got out for a meal, and I was sort of sat with my dad. Because all I can remember is going to hear Steve Cram's voice commentating on it, because it was that Saturday night when everything was sort of, Mo Farah won,
everybody
Greg
won.
Rutherford, it was the Super Saturday. It was that night. Sid would have loved it. Ironically, he was not a huge athletics fan, but he would have enjoyed it, as any sports fan would. But I was sat with him, so I remember that in the other room. It was raining outside. It was very dark. And he was flitting in and out of consciousness, and not always lucid, because he was, he wasn't really eating. Familiar for anybody who's had something close to them go through cancer. But he did. Just one point, he woke up and he looked at him and he said, "We had some laughs, didn't we?"
That's what he said to you.
Yeah, we had some laughs, didn't we? Because that was a phrase of his.
Yeah.
And another phrase of his that he used to use: "Did we ever?" And I said to him, "Did we ever?" And then he sort of just closed his eyes and slipped back into illness. He was alive for a few more days after that, but that was the last sort of conscious words he said to me, which is why I wanted to put the title of that as the book, because it's true, we did. Whenever you were with my dad, you laughed. He made sure you did. Big old laughs. And he also, the story, I wanted there to be humour throughout the book. And reflect that, because there's a lot of these stories, sometimes it wasn't intentional laughs, but there was always laughs. So and then a few days later after that he died, and that was quite a bizarre experience, because I knew there would be quite a fond reaction to him dying. I knew how fondly people thought of him, I knew how fondly the people in the world of darts thought of him, but what we weren't prepared for, particularly in the age of social media, was this sort of, wasn't an you didn't want to go overboard, it wasn't Princess Diana, was it? But there was Wayne Rooney, a lot of people, John Prescott, people in all kinds of different walks of life, Gary Lineker, just tweeting very fondly about him, just a real, and turn on the TV and it's there. He was met that night at the Olympics, they mentioned it on the commentary.
Oh, right.
It was very, and it was really, we really appreciated that. It was really quite a nice thing to see. And then we had all these newspapers with these huge obituaries, and I turned to Irene and I said, there's one person who would have really enjoyed all of this. That's my old man. He used to, I've told a story about how he'd crawl across the Arctic tundra in his underpants if he thought that the Daily Star had a nib about the darts on page 73. He'd go and buy 15 copies. He just loved being in the newspapers. And here he is, in the Times and in the Telegraph, full page obituaries, and he's not here to read them. He'd be like, the injustice of it all. So it it was quite that was very, very comforting and also very moving to sort of see that reaction to him, just to realise just how much people had sort of enjoyed his company, his commentary, and just him throughout his life.
And finally, what are the lessons in life you've learned from Sid Waddell, your father, that will stay with you for life?
Partly, don't take yourself too seriously. You know,
Right.
A lot of people take themselves, and life throws a lot of crap at you. Don't get too bogged down with it. Try and laugh. Try and enjoy yourself. Have fun. Make sure the people around you, your family, are enjoying themselves. Just be inclusive. Have fun. And whatever you did, he had your back.
Right.
And that's what, particularly in terms of family and your friends and the people you're close to. And I've always kept that from Sid. Have people's back. Make sure you include people. Make sure you have fun. And I don't think those are bad lessons to learn.